Okay, freshmen, we are now gearing on to the next session, which is on Malay Studies. We are fortunate to have with us Professor Alatas, who is available to respond to your questions. For those freshmen who are just joining us, we're just flashing the QR code to the live Q&A Paul F service that we have set up. It's paulf.com/FASS live webinar. So you can either key in the URL or the QR code. We are on standby to respond to your questions, and we have with us Professor Alatas. Before we begin the POLAF proper, I wonder, Professor Alatas, whether you would be gracious enough to introduce yourself to the freshmen. Thank you, Professor Alatas.
Thank you, Nisar. Well, first of all, welcome to the students. I'm happy to be here to welcome you and also answer any questions you might have. So I'm Syed Farid Alatas. I'm a professor actually of sociology, but jointly appointed to Malay Studies department. I've been around NUS for many, many years. I'm embarrassed to say, so I won't tell you exactly how many years. And I've been involved with Malay Studies also for a very long time. So if you have any other questions about me, you can ask. Otherwise, let's proceed, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Yes, we are on the POLAF questionnaire screen on the Zoom screen, Professor. So we have a couple of questions here. So we hand it over to you. You can fire away and respond. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Yeah, okay, shall I? The first question is, do we need to have a background in Malay language in order to major in Malay studies? You don't need to, to actually know Malay, although it's good if you do, pick up the language. See, because almost all the modules are in English. We do have a couple of literature modules that are taught in Malay, but the rest are taught in English. So it's of course possible to, to major without actually using Malay language. But of course, it's always good to learn a language. If you do know Malay, then you're obviously, you have access to stuff that's written in Malay. But having said that, there is a lot of material on the Malay world, not only on Singapore, but on Malaysia, on Indonesia, which is written in English. Shall I go on to the next question, Nisar?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Next question.
This question is about MS 1102, the exposure module. Please share what is conveyed in this module, any prerequisite necessary. No, there's no prerequisite necessary. It's a very basic module, just like all the exposure modules in other departments, in the discipline-based departments like sociology, political science, or the Asian studies departments. These exposure modules don't have prerequisites. They're precisely meant to expose you to the field, so that when you take the module in your first semester, it gives you an idea of what the field is about, and it also helps you to decide whether you want to major in that particular field. So that's the purpose. So it's a basic module that covers a bit about the history of the Malay world, and different issues concerning Malay society, such as religion, religious revival, political developments, the problem of development, modernization, issues relating to the family, social structure, in all kinds of issues. I should also let you know that when we say Malay Studies, it's not about Singapore. It's not just about Malaysia. It's about the entire Malay world. So for us, the Malay world is wherever the Malays are. So of course, in Southeast Asia, the Malays are in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and even southern Thailand and parts of the Philippines, especially the southern part of the Philippines. So we consider this the Malay world. But we've also taught about Malays in Cape Town or in Sri Lanka. I had a student once, a PhD student whose thesis was about Malays in Sri Lanka. So it's we have a broad understanding of Malay studies and what constitutes the Malay world. So you'll get that kind of broad exposure in MS 1102E. Okay.
Next question is I'm interested in the entire ASEAN region. Am I limiting my job prospects by pursuing Malay studies?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, definitely you're not limiting your prospects. You see, you have to understand that the undergraduate degree is a basic degree. You know, whether it's sociology or political science or Malay studies or Chinese studies, these are basic degrees. And the same goes for some of the sciences. You know, you take biology or chemistry or whatever. So they don't train you to be highly specialized. If you want to be specialized, you go on to do a master's or even a PhD. So with a bachelor's degree in virtually any field, you are qualified for a whole range of jobs after you graduate. So typically, people may enter the business world, or they may enter government service, and advertising, human resources, and of course, in addition to all these sectors that you could work in, if you have a degree in Malay Studies and you have a particular interest in working in something that's related to the Malay world or religion, Islam, then of course you would be well qualified to enter one of those professions. If you wanted to work with let's say you wanted to be a journalist with the Malay press, for example, then of course Malay Studies would be an added advantage. The same thing goes, if you were Japanese studies and you wanted to have a job in Japan, of course Japanese studies would be useful, but it doesn't disadvantage you if you want to work outside of the so-called Malay sector. You wanted to work in you wanted to have a job in the private sector or the public sector. What you need is a good undergraduate degree. It doesn't matter whether it's Malay studies or South Asian studies or sociology. That's the way you should think about it.
Thank you. Are there field trips available for Malay studies? And if yes, where to and at which year?
Yes, that's a good question. Actually, for many years, we've been having field trips both within the Malay world as well as outside. I myself have been conducting field trips to Istanbul in Turkey and Tehran in Iran. And this was a joint program between Malay Studies and USP. And of course, we have field trips within the region. I myself, as well as colleagues, do conduct field trips to different parts of Malaysia, to parts of Indonesia, different cities in Indonesia, Jakarta, Yogyakarta, and so on. So this is, it's an important part of doing Malay studies, to actually travel and meet students and lecturers in other parts of the Malay world, get involved in in academic types of activities. For example, once I took a group to Yogyakarta, and we had a 1-week program. We visited some universities, some research institutions. We did a lot of sightseeing as well, and a lot of visits to cultural sites. So it was a lot of fun. But one of the things we asked the students to do, they each had to make a presentation. We organized a seminar as part of the program, the study trip. We had a seminar in one of the universities in Yogyakarta, and the students were required to make presentations in Malay language. This is sort of to give them, to help them to gain more proficiency for those who needed it. Yes, so definitely field trips are on. And the question was, where to? I've answered that. Yes, that's a good question. Where to? I told you where we have been going. But we are ready and interested to go anywhere, actually. So we can easily plan. The advantage is that the places in the region are rather near and not too expensive. And we have good contacts. So sometimes we're able to get, discounted or free lodging. So it's possible to go anywhere. And many of us in the department have contacts and experience in different parts of the Malay world. I've been planning myself a trip to Manila. Actually, was supposed to go next semester, but it had to be cancelled because of COVID. Hopefully, the situation will improve next year. But as I said, it's possible to plan a trip, depending on what students are interested in. So if some students get together and say, we'd like to have a study trip to Surabaya in Indonesia, we can plan it. So, it's really up to the interests of the students, up to you, what you're interested in, and also, whether you can find a professor who's interested to take you, which I think is not difficult.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next question is, what is the difference if I major in Malay Studies instead of Southeast Asian Studies?
There are two major differences. One is that Southeast Asian Studies will cover countries which we don't cover in Malay Studies. For example, you talk about Thailand, especially the Buddhist dimension of Thailand. Of course, in the south of Thailand, you have a Malay region where they speak Malay and where the culture is Malay. So, of course, that would come under Malay Studies. But many things to do with Thailand, Cambodia, Burma, Vietnam, and so on, those don't come under Malay Studies, unless you're talking about a Malay community in Champa, for example, right, in Cambodia. So that's one difference. The other difference is, of course, has to do with perspective. So Malay Studies has its own perspective. Every department has its own approach and its own perspective to dealing with particular issues and problems. So Malay Studies has its own perspective. It's an old department. It's one of the older departments in the faculty. Started in 1967, and actually the department was started even earlier when the university was the University of Malaya. Some of you may not know, and NUS used to be University of Singapore. And then before that, it was the University of Malaya, which was based in Singapore. And after separation from Malaysia, it became the University of Singapore. Since the department was established, newly established in 1967, it has taken taken on a very critical approach to the study of Malay society. dealing with the colonial mentality, dealing with the problem of intellectual imperialism, dealing with racism, and many other critical issues. It's a department that's very critical of of how Malays have been portrayed in colonial literature and even in post-colonial literature. And it's also very self-critical of how the Malays themselves, Malay scholarship, an aspect of Malay scholarship is rather uncritical. So these are, and you'll get an idea of this when you take 1102 and when you take other modules and you meet us in the department.
Thank you, Professor. The next question is there a difference between the Malay world and the Islamic world?
Well, yeah, yes, of course. There's a big difference because the Islamic world is a much larger world, right? The Islamic world or the Muslim world stretches from Morocco in the west to Indonesia in the east, and you have many cultural areas that together constitute the Muslim world. You have the Arab-speaking part of the Muslim world. You have which are the Arab countries. You have the Persian-speaking countries of the Muslim world, which include Iran, Tajikistan, parts of Afghanistan, and then you have the Turkic part of the Muslim world, the countries where they speak a Turkic language, such as Turkey, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. And then you have India, where you have also one of the largest Muslim communities in the world, actually, India and Pakistan, which is also and speaking various languages. Of course, one of the major languages is Urdu, but the Muslims there speak many other languages. And then, of course, you have the Malay world, right? Which is we could say is the Malay-speaking world, that dimension of the Muslim world. So there is a big difference. The largest Muslim country in the world is Indonesia. It has the largest population. For that reason alone, the Malay part of the Muslim world is a very important part of the Muslim world. Yeah.
Next question is this: is there a difference between MS 1101E and 1102E, Malay's tradition, change, and conflict?
Yeah, that's a short answer to that. No, there isn't. I think you can check the what do you call it? The course description and get some of the details.
Okay. Next question is: what are the job prospects of Malay Studies majors other than in the government sector? Is it true that Malay Studies major mainly become Malay language teachers?
No, actually, most Malay Studies majors don't become Malay language teachers because we don't train people to be Malay language teachers. And we don't train people in the Malay language. So our program is not a language program, right? It's not a Malay language program. It's a program that teaches you about the Malay world. And specifically, it teaches you about, we could say, 3 aspects of the Malay world. Aspects that are covered by the social sciences, so the sociology of the Malays, the politics of the Malays, the history of the Malays, those have to do more with social sciences. And then you have aspects that relate to literature. Yeah, so we talk about the literary aspects of Malay tradition. I said three aspects, but actually there are these two aspects, right? The social science of Malay society, history, politics, sociology, and so on, and you have those aspects relating to literature, such as Malay literature, both classical Malay literature as well as modern Malay literature. So this is what we focus on. We're not a department that teaches language and or linguistics, right?
Okay, thank you, Professor. Next question is MS 1102E. Is it solely taught in English, or will exams be English as well?
Yeah, good question. MS 1102E is taught in English. As I said, all the modules are taught in English, with the exception of a couple of modules that are sometimes taught in Malay. And those couple of modules are in literature. But all the other modules are taught in English. Now, we do have a policy where we allow students, if they want, they can answer their exam questions they can choose to answer their exam questions in Malay. This is probably something that's especially good for foreign students, let's say students from Indonesia, whose English are good, but they may be more comfortable writing in Malay. So they have the choice of answering exam questions in Malay, or writing their thesis in Malay. That's a choice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Professor, is what are my prospects for postgrad study in Malay Studies?
Well, okay, let me see. The question is, what are my prospects for postgraduate study in Malay Studies? Now, I'm not sure exactly what, okay, it sounds like you want to know whether you can do postgraduate studies in Malay Studies. Okay. The prospects are poor simply because there aren't many postgraduate programs in Malay Studies. Now, if you wanted to do MA or PhD in our department, of course, you can. The prospects are excellent. But there are not many postgraduate programs in Malay Studies around the world. You have a couple in Malaysia. You may have one in Indonesia, and there might be one or two elsewhere, but there are very few, even undergraduate or postgraduate programs in Malay Studies. But that shouldn't be a deterrence to you, because the main thing is that if you are interested in studying the Malay world, you don't need to do a master's or a PhD in Malay Studies. If you wanted to do it in Malay Studies at NUS, you're welcome to do that. But if you wanted to go elsewhere where they don't have Malay Studies for a MA or PhD, you don't have to. It's okay, because you can. If you have an undergraduate degree in Malay Studies, you could go to another university for your master's or PhD and read sociology, or political science or history. You can do a master's in history, or a master's in political science, or a PhD in sociology. Your thesis topic could be about something about the Malay world, but you can do it in a department, in a discipline-based department. And in many countries, in the US, in the UK, in Australia, in Germany, in other parts of Europe, you will find historians, anthropologists, sociologists in sociology departments, in anthropology departments, in history departments, who specialize in the Malay world. So you can continue your interest in Malay Studies without necessarily being in a postgraduate program in Malay Studies.
Thank you, Professor. Okay, the next question is this. I understand I understand that there's a new minor in Asian Studies, and I see that it is available under the other Asian Studies departments as well. I'm confused. How is this applicable for Malay Studies students?
Yeah, okay, I'm a bit confused too. Is Radin around?
Yes. This is the new minor in Asian Studies, which
Okay,
connects Southeast and South Asian.
it means, okay, Nisar, correct me if I'm wrong. It means that people can major in one Asian Studies and minor in another.
I believe this is connected to the new minor that has been announced, Asian Studies minor.
Yeah.
Yeah, Radin, are you here?
Hello.
Hi, Radin. Hi, Radin.
Hi, Radin. Radin, could you help us with this?
Okay. Some of the modules in the if you are going to take the Malay Studies modules, some of the modules are actually part of the minor also. But in order for you to be a minor in Asian Studies, you will need to take a gateway module, which is AA1201, which will be available on this coming semester. So,
okay, but Radin, Radin, I think the question is, if you are doing a minor in Asian Studies, does it mean your major is from social science? That means could you major in Malay Studies, for example, and minor in Asian Studies? Is that possible?
I think it's possible, but can I ask the person to email me and I will get back to that in more details.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay. So to whoever asked the question, we are all confused. So just email Radin and he will he'll find out and let you know.
Nisa will
yes.
email, right?
Yeah. Okay, before I share the email address, I just received some information. So the minor in Asian Studies is a multidisciplinary minor jointly offered by the following Asian Studies departments, programs in FASS, the Department of Southeast Asian Studies, Malay Studies, South Asian Studies program, Department of Japanese Studies, and Department of Chinese Studies. So this is a very fresh or very new, it's our newest multidisciplinary minor actually that has just been announced and made available. So if you do have specific questions regarding this new minor, you could send an email to FASBox, FASBox59@nus.edu.sg. It is a relatively new program, so if you have any questions, it can be responded to there.
Thanks, Nisa.
Okay, no worries. Thank you, Prof. The next question is number 4. Hang on, I'm sorry, number 4 major. Okay, number 4 of major requirement states that to major in Malay Studies, I must complete 40 MCs of level 4000 modules. Must these modules be within Malay Studies or are they unrestricted?
Okay, well, you can find out the exact details from the website or from contacting us, but most of the modules of course have to be done within Malay Studies, but there are some modules that you can take in other departments that are recognized in Malay Studies as fulfilling our requirements. But if you want, some more details, please get in touch with us.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Professor, we are about 2 minutes, actually 1 minute away from closing. Would you like to take one question or?
Yes, I think there's a good question here. Would you recommend taking double major Malay Studies and Sociology?
Perfect.
Are there any modules? Yes, of course. Of course, I would recommend that. I mean, because I'm from Sociology and I'm from Malay Studies. But seriously, I think it's a good combination to do Malay Studies and a discipline, whether it's Malay Studies and Sociology or Malay Studies and Political Science or Malay Studies and History. That's an excellent combination, because it's always good to have, a major in Malay Studies where you learn a lot about the region. At the same time, you are deeply rooted in a discipline, where you get the theoretical and methodological training as well. So it's a good combination, and you should consider that. And very rarely would there be modules that what do you call it, that would result in double counting, because the modules are really very different. So you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Alatas, for your time. We really appreciate it. On behalf of the freshmen on this call, I'd just like to thank you from the Malay Studies for sharing your knowledge and expertise and responding to our freshmen. If you have any questions from freshmen, you could contact this number 6516-6133 or fasthelp@nus.edu.sg. If you have specific questions for the Malay Studies Department, please feel free to reach out to fastbox59@nus.edu.sg. Once again, thank you so much, Professor Alatas, for being with us and sharing your expertise.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.